Hi, and good day to you. This is Robert Giordano, again from New Plan Learning. We're back with another segment in our demystification series. Today, we're at the California Charter School Conference, and we are meeting with Executive Director Jason Watts from Scholarship Prep, a high performing charter school network in California. And today, we're going to talk about charter school expansion. And so let's say you're a superintendent or an ED of a network and you're thinking about expanding outside of your footprint. We're going to talk to Jason today about that. But before we do, can you tell us a little bit about the great work that your network is doing?
Yeah, so we have 4 sites in Southern California, 3 different counties, so LA, Orange, and San Diego. We've been approved for a 5th site in Riverside County. And then more recently, we were approved to open up in Iowa. So we are part of a groundswell of school choice movement, folks, if you will, coming from all parts of the country. We're the, I think, only one coming from west of Iowa to open a K-5 and a 6-8 in 2025-26.
This is exciting. You just didn't get here by your natural good looks and charm. You guys have done a lot of great work. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the successes you've had getting you up to this point?
Yeah, so our focus is predominantly fostering homeless youth. We have an overall focus on those most underserved perpetually, longitudinally, but we found over time that our niche is really fostering homeless for a number of different reasons, but ultimately is who we saw that we were serving already. And so over time, we've grown to about 20% of our total population is fostering homeless. With that comes a lot of services, wraparound supports. COVID was a transition for us and we had to pivot, but it really enabled us to kind of centralize our focus on the kinds of things we needed to do for those families and the students in schools. That now we could kind of expand those beyond the school site into their homes. And that COVID piece really enabled us to look at it differently. I think we're better off for it.
One of the successes you had is you won a federal replication grant, right? For how many millions?
So we received $12 million from the federal government for expansion and replication. And that was based on our academic performance for the populations that we serve. So we had, in 2017-18, the highest math growth in California and the top 1% ELA growth that same year. So we were able to pivot that and parlay that into that large grant.
That's not the only award you won. You've won another handful of different awards from the state of California for performance as well. All these things led you up to the point where you're growing. It's not necessarily a rapid growth. You've been growing steadily in a high caliber way. What led you, what are you thinking as the ED, as you're thinking about growth going forward? What are the things that are most foremost on your mind that superintendents or EDs from around the country should also be thinking about?
I think for us, it's staying true to yourself. And what does that mean for us? Our mission and vision, who we want to serve. We've never believed in the cap of enrollment growth. So, capping us at 5 schools or 10 schools. It's more about our mission and vision. We want to go into a community and create change. So a lot of the communities we go into, the college going rate is extremely low. Most of these families, no one's ever been to college. So we're trying to change that trajectory. So to cap that, it wouldn't make sense. So as we grow, it's more about capacity. It's more about outcomes. How successful can we be? So if we can keep growing steadily and intelligently, but still have that high outcome that allows us to get some of these grants and other recognitions, and those things, those funds, if you will, those continue to buoy the work that we're doing. So if we weren't successful, we couldn't get those additional funds to support what we do. And all those things kind of work in collaboration with one another.
I want to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. We're back for the second part of Demystifying series with Jason Watts from Scholarship Prep Schools. We're going to start talking a little bit about culture.
So for us, when we think about growth, we have to make sure our culture is really set in stone. So I talked about being true to who you are, knowing your mission and vision, and everybody has to be rowing in the same direction. Everybody has to be bought into loving those kids the way they are and wanting those kids in your school. If we don't want those kids in your school, that's a problem, right? And so we set that culture early up in that perspective. And then on top of that, when you go into a community, We know facilities is probably the most difficult thing in terms of being able to find a home that aligns to what you're about, your program, components, et cetera. And in order to do that, you have to have strong finances. So part of the growth piece is being deliberate and being slow to allow yourself to build up the economic sustainability to make those moves.
Economic sustainability?
So for us, that means a number of different things. The populations we serve, they generate higher funds, but they also mean that we have to support those students in more ways than a typical student, right? So we have to go out and seek grants. We have to go out and work with other partners to help us kind of build those funds, and then also be very concerted in our spending in our program. So don't go out and say buy things that you don't need. So as an example, don't buy a $1,500 Chromebook for a student when a $700 Chromebook would do.
Yeah.
And those little decisions over time start to kind of piggyback onto each other and allow you to then grow this capacity to grow your organization. And it happens more quickly than you would think. And as you grow each school, it multiplies and multiplies. And lastly, you should not be growing if you don't have results. To go from where you're at into a new community, the idea is that you're going to bring something of value and change that community. So if you haven't locked in your program, if you haven't locked in how to get those results for whatever community you're trying to serve, you have no business growing.
How far ahead do you start thinking about growing to a different? Are you thinking about 5 years ahead? Are you thinking 2 or 3 years ahead? What is when you're thinking about growth? How many years ahead are you thinking?
All of the above.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Sometimes in charter school world, it's about season and opportunity, and they are fewer and far between, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of like the longitudinal thinking, of course, we're looking at the fiscal piece. We're looking at finding facilities and looking at different communities that align to our mission and vision, but also you're looking at things like population density. So you're tracking how the population is growing within the different regional centers you're looking at. You're looking at politics. You're looking at voting tendencies of the boards that would be approving you. And so if the politics are not right, don't go. And may mean you're waiting 4 years for things to change, the tide to move, right? And shift. And that's happened to us. We've had areas we wanted to grow into, but we couldn't because we didn't have the votes. So we've had to wait. And so patience is a virtue. It's tough. You want to move, but it's not always a logical thing to do.
I think that what Jason is talking about is essential. A lot of people talk about growth, but what he's just shared with you is critical. He's looking at finances, academic performance, culture, politics, facility locations. All this is a gumbo, which you're juggling, right? And you're waiting. But as a CEO or as an ED, you're looking ahead, you're researching, you're figuring out where you want to be. So when the opportunity is right, you're able to seize that. Is this mixture of all these different pieces, finance, culture, facilities, politics, the right staff to bring on board? Or is there anything else that you're thinking about? Or are these really the primary pieces?
No, you know what? You touched on something very important. Staff is critical. I mean, staff is so critical. If you don't have the right team members, nothing I said will work, right? So for us, one of the things that we found to be extremely important is don't hire friends, don't hire buddies, hire people who are competent, who are experts in what you need them to do. If you hire experts, and I'm talking about every position, it could be a classroom teacher, it could be an administrator, it could be a custodian.
Yeah.
It does not matter. You want to hire experts who love what they do, are passionate about it. If your whole organization is built on those people, all the things I talked about are easy. If you've got one or two people who are not passionate, one or two people who are not experts, what happens is if I hire you to take on an important role and you can't do it, what does that mean? I had to do some of that role, right?
Right.
It pulls me away from other things I could be doing, but also builds resentment and other things that kind of flow from that. But if you are an expert, I can say, what do you need? You can say, I'm good. Thanks. I'm going to move on and do what I need to do. And I could trust that you're going to get the job done. And that's so critical for an organization to be, fostering growth, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years down the line, when you're building these team members who have strong capacity and allowing that growth to happen naturally because you can actually fill every gap that exists as you're growing that other organizations don't fill because they're focusing on the wrong thing.
So we're going to talk about this in more detail in a minute. So this ends the second of the third part series with Jason Watts. We'll be right back, and we're going to talk about hiring the right staff to meet your mission.